Working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for you is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for you.
Good afternoon, and I welcome you to another Working for You program. I am Roy Williams. We are sorry for the late start today. Today we are going to be discussing, of course, a very important topic, and that is what role the diaspora plays in national development. There are two upcoming conferences with respect to the diasporic community. One of them is for the very first time, the Diaspora Conference, which we'll hear about, and ANSAR, which has been going for a very long time, I think 18 years. That's correct. I have with me Ms. Kaye, who is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and who is also the chair of the Planning Committee for the first ever Diaspora Conference. And I have with me as well Mr. Calvin Cable, who is, sorry, what was on my mind? Not Calvin Cable. Calvin James.
That's correct.
Rest in peace, Mr. Calvin Cable. Mr. James, who is the chair of the local organizing committee for ANSAR 2018.
That's correct.
Okay? So, we are going to engage in a very lively discussion today. But before we begin, we hear the term diaspora all the time. What does the word mean? Ms. Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for having us here this afternoon. The classic or conventional meaning for diaspora really stem from the dispersion of the Jews, the forceful expulsion of the Jews from to Babylon and from the Roman Empire, by the Roman Empire. And over time, the meaning has evolved. Even though it initially started as defining a movement, now it has come to mean a people. And these people might be immigrants and their descendants who live outside of their country of origin or ancestry, whether temporarily or permanently, but they maintain some affective or sentimental and material links with their country of origin.
Sure.
Yes. So basically, traditionally, you would have had the African diaspora, persons who were moved forcibly in the transatlantic trade, slave trade, and you had the Jews. But today, people move, whether voluntarily or, sadly, involuntarily, to other countries, but they still maintain those links.
Yes.
And these are who we will be catering to, our nationals and their descendants who live abroad but still maintain ties with St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right, and of course you mentioned the Israelites, the Jews, and their exile in Babylonia, and it was a time of reflection for them. Of course, the temple where they worshipped, where their God, they worshipped their God, was destroyed. And so it was a tremendous loss for them. They went into Babylon. Some of the scriptures were written in Babylon while they reflected there and so on. But there was a cry. The cry was always to return to Jerusalem, to their homeland. When the temple, of course, was rebuilt.
Yes. And that nostalgic feeling or nostalgia that the Jews felt is still evident today with the Jews, but also with persons who have emigrated, gone from St. Kitts and Nevis. Their desire is to one day come back, and we have seen that happening with returning nationals, persons who are retiring and coming back to St. Kitts and Nevis to give back to their country.
Right, and that song, you know, that psalm, the psalms are songs that came out of that time in exile by the rivers of Babylon. There we sat and we wept when we remembered Zion.
Of course.
And how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? A strange land. So, just a little bit there. But why should countries make the most of their diasporas?
I think more and more countries are realizing that the diaspora has value. They give back to their countries of destination, and they give back to their countries of origin or ancestry. For St. Kitts and Nevis, we know that remittances, even though it's just over 1% contribution to GDP, in some countries like Jamaica, it could be Jamaica and the Dominican Republic, studies have shown that up to between 25 and 30% of their GDP might be coming from remittances. But it is not only in remittances that we see the diaspora making a contribution. We see that they can invest. They come back as investors. They are innovators. They bring back best practices.
The transfer of knowledge.
The transfer of knowledge. And they also assist with our human capital. We know sometimes it is difficult to fill positions. Persons with certain skills may not be available here in the Federation. But if we were to look further afield at our diaspora population, we might be able to get persons who are skilled in areas that would benefit the development of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Sure. Now, the relationship between diasporas and their homelands often encompasses a broad palette of sentiments, including distrust, resentment, envy, and enmity, really. Colloquially, people describe a bout of emigration as a period in which a country lost a certain proportion of its population. But that population, the people who leave the country, have not disappeared. But sometimes it is not always viewed in a positive light. It is viewed in a negative light. In other words, you hear terms like brain drain and so on. And of course, there are push and pull factors that have to do with migration.
Yes.
And, sometimes we'd rather our people to remain and contribute rather than to go out there and contribute. But what we are saying is that the diaspora has not disappeared, and they can still contribute to national development, even though they live, many of them, in the metropolitan countries.
Yes. And it's interesting that you mentioned brain drain, because there has been a new term that has evolved, and that's brain gain. That is that the countries of destination are able to gain the talents and resources of all people who might have gone to live in their country. But there's a new term, brain circulation, and that refers to the transfer of skills and knowledge back to the home country.
Right.
So you have brain drain, which may be considered a pejorative term or negative term, but you also have brain gain, which when they would have developed their skills in their countries of destination and have given to that country, they can come back to give back to their country of origin.
Yeah, that is one perspective, of course. We always tend to look to the metropolitan countries as being better and have what the ideals are and so on and such. Sometimes we flock to these countries, but that is not always true. But that's another discussion. What do you think, though, can be done to change the negative perception that even some governments have of their diasporas?
Mr. Williams, I think communication is key, and dialogue. I think what we have been seeing is that our diaspora might be coming back sometimes to vote, and this of course has been viewed negatively by some because their perception is that you do not live here. How can you decide who is going to be our leaders? But I think it is important to realize that the diaspora, I'm trying to remember the question that you asked. I haven't.
The question that I asked is
Yes,
to change a
communication.
negative perception.
Yes, communication. A lot of times we see that when our leaders, governments go overseas, they tend to have town hall meetings. And during these town hall meetings, we see an engagement. And the governments begin to understand what are the needs of the diaspora. And the diaspora begin to understand what can the government give, or how can we partner with our government in order to be a mutually beneficial relationship, so that we benefit and our governments and country benefit. So I think dialogue is important. We have to build trust. The diaspora have to come to realize that the government might be only able to do so much, but what it commits to, it is determined to deliver on. And when you build that trust, I think the negative perceptions, on both sides, nationally as well as of the diaspora overseas, will begin to change.
Certainly. So therefore, it's important for governments to keep that connection
Yes.
through communication,
Yes.
and communication that will build trust
Yes.
rather than alienation, because that's not what you need. Now, we're having the Diaspora Conference coming up, and it's the first ever.
Yes.
It's historic. Tell us something about it. What is the theme and why such a theme? Who are some of the key speakers at the conference? The purpose of the conference? What are the expected outcomes? Some of the events and so on.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. The idea of engaging with the diaspora is not a new phenomenon for St. Kitts and Nevis. As I said, when governments go overseas, they tend to have town hall meetings. But we believe that engaging the diaspora should be more strategic. It should be determined, and it should not be sporadic, but it should be regular. And so in our foreign policy, which actually was designed in 2014, one of our strategies was to create and maintain strong networks with the diaspora through our overseas missions. So we were intending to be able to develop a database that will be able to map and locate where members of our diaspora live, the majority of our diaspora community. When we would have done that, then we would be able to engage them better and find out what their needs are and how we can meet those needs, and how they, with their wherewithal, resources, can give back to the country. So the Diaspora Conference is our first, but we had in the back of our minds all the time that we have to develop a strategy whereby we could reach out to the diaspora. And so we were inspired by Jamaica in particular, who this year, last year I think, yes, had its 6th Diaspora Conference, where its 55th independence anniversary. And we thought that it is something that we can try, not of course to emulate to the extent the diaspora in Jamaica, because they are having had it for so many years, and this being our first, we can't expect to reach their height. But it is an attempt to first of all engage further with the diaspora. And so it will be held from the 26th to the 28th of June at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort. We have a website in place, and persons can register for free online at www.diaspora.gov.kn. In that registration form, we have a section where members of the diaspora can indicate what area of expertise they have, whether it's in agriculture, engineering, energy, information technology. Our idea is that when they do come, we can network, we can form relationships and foster friendships that will redound to the benefit of St. Kitts and Nevis as well as to the diaspora members. We will have a number of forums And one of the forums is a youth forum, and all of the forums will be moderated by youth, SCANIPA members, etc. And we are anticipating that entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, will be able to get an opportunity to network with other entrepreneurs who live abroad. In addition to the panels, we also have a cocktail reception and a cultural extravaganza. This will be under the auspices of His Excellency, Sir Tapley Seaton, who has graciously consented to host us there. And we are also having a number of tours. 2 key presentations will come from the International Organization on Migration, and they will be doing a presentation entitled Diaspora and Development. And we also have one by Dr. Jessica Byron, a native of the Federation. She will be presenting on sustainable development. And sorry, another key presenter is Mr. Anthony Ross QC, who will be presenting on public-private partnerships, because we realize that that the development involves a multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approach.
Yes.
And so the private sector, the government, the civil society should all come together in order to derive the necessary benefits
Yes.
from the diaspora population.
Did you mention the theme?
The theme is building partnerships towards sustainable development.
That is sort of self-explanatory.
Yes.
What is sustainable development, though?
Well,
Maybe some people would ask.
Sustainable development pertains to economic development, having a balance while you develop economically. There's a balance with the environment. But the sustainable development in our theme really focuses on the sustainable development goals. As you would recall, in September 2015, St. Kitts and Nevis, along with other member states of the United Nations, committed to the 2030 agenda. And this has 17 goals. There are 17 sustainable development goals. It ranges from eradication of poverty, education, increasing education, improving health, up to international partnerships. And the government of St. Kitts and Nevis realizes that by itself, it cannot achieve all of these. And therefore, it must establish and build relationships. And one key entity with which to build that relationship is the diaspora and also the private sector. And so we believe that the activities that we have planned will indeed foster a more constructive relationship between all parties.
Okay. Now, of course, we know we have 3 types of development. Basically, when we are talking about the concept of development: economic development,
Social.
sustainable development, and human development. But when it boils down to the nitty-gritty, all development is really centered around the human person and human development.
Yes.
Now, economic growth is not economic development, because economic growth is measured in terms of gross domestic product and gross national product, and we know what those are. It's about how much the country produces and how much money the country makes in terms of its income from such production. But it is how that money, that income, is used for the betterment of the people. So they are not one and the same thing. We can talk about we are making a lot of money and all this sort of a thing, but how is that money being used to benefit the people?
Yes.
And the diaspora and its contribution to sustainable development. It's about that really.
Yes. And I
How
think
can development be sustained? And how can the diaspora help in sustaining that development within the national framework?
the diaspora can play a significant role, but I think it depends on the foundation. What relationship do you build? Because once you build a relationship, that relationship can continue for a very long time. If I may, permit me to draw reference to a native of St. Kitts and Nevis. I don't want to particular single out anyone, but this is one who is well known, and her name is Idris Beachwig, or Idris Lewis. She was born and raised in St. Kitts and Nevis. If I'm not mistaken, she would have been a student at the now Tucker Clark Primary. And she comes back on an annual basis, and she gives back to the school. She gives back to other schools. And so this is an activity that has been sustained because that relationship that was built initially had been strong. There was a strong foundation, and that can be sustained. I think I just want to also refer to what happened in Dominica a few years back when they were building the Dominica State College. The diaspora played a significant role. Managers in the US who were in top positions were called upon to develop not only the structure, the infrastructure of the college, but also the curriculum. And these committed their services pro bono. It was at no cost. And the Dominica State College continues today as a tertiary education and as a model of what the diaspora can do. Only recently, during Hurricane Irma and Maria, the damages that were suffered in Dominica were felt worldwide, and the diaspora made a significant contribution. They mobilized immediately, and they were able to get emergency needs met because they mobilized in wherever they were, the US, Canada, the UK, and they were able to send barrels upon barrels of food stuff and other items for the benefit of their people in country.
Right.
This is one example of how the diaspora can contribute on a sustainable basis to their country.
Right. And so important, because what you mentioned earlier, in terms of maintaining that connection, the communication and building the trust and so on, all of those things are really about sustainable development. Because if the diaspora is cut off, where is the sustainability?
Yes.
Because they are still part and parcel of our societies, the societies from which they came, even though they would have gone to live elsewhere.
Yes. And that is the link. I think what sustains it too is a sentimental link. They still remember the school that they attended.
Just like the
school,
Jews longing for the
neighborhood,
temple.
the friends they played with, the places they used to hang out. And this sentimental or affective link is going to keep them connected.
That's right.
To their home country.
That's right. How many people are expected at the conference, and from where?
Yes, we are catering for about 250 persons. We are actually exploiting those who are coming for ANSAR.
Yes, we'll get to
opportunity.
ANSAR just now.
But about 250 persons, and they will be coming from the United Kingdom, North America, including Canada and the United States, and also the US Virgin Islands.
Right. And of course, Anguilla, and we'll talk about that.
Regional.
Yeah. Something that has always, or something that is very much a topical issue today, that of dual citizenship. Many of those who live in the metropolitan countries, whether it be the UK, whether it be North America, whether it be Canada, some of them hold dual citizenship. The Akitishans and Nevisians, yes, but they're also citizens of these metropolitan countries. And our Constitution debars them from political representation at the highest level, which is one of the questions today. And sometimes I want to ask, and it might not be for you to answer, but do you think that that hampers the participation of members of the diasporic community in holding high office in the countries of their birth and contributing by returning to contribute to their countries, because it simply means, as far as our constitution is today, they will have to give up one. So maybe that is something that we should have to look at somewhere down the line.
Yes, it is difficult to ascertain what percentage of the diaspora community aspires to political leadership in their country of origin. There are other opportunities for them to participate. I'm sure if we were to do a survey, we will find that a very small percentage of those living overseas want to come back to be Prime Minister or a Member of Parliament.
But still there is a percentage.
There is a percentage. And I think that what is important is that there are other avenues in which they can give back. But if it is possible, if there are persons who are so committed to giving back at that high level, it would be good if we see an interest at a lower level first, and then the people can determine whether indeed this is a person who will do well at the high level.
Okay. Good. Now, let us move a little bit to ANSAR. ANSAR, Anguilla, Nevis, and St. Kitts Associations reunion. This reunion has been happening now for 18 years.
No, 35.
35 years.
35 years.
Wow.
Started in 1983, actually.
Okay.
So this
Good.
is the 35th year of the existence of ANSAR.
Right. Now the 18 years is having is
18th
it
celebration, because
the
every 2 years,
celebration.
every 2 years ANSAR is being held.
So it is every 2
Yeah,
years.
from 1988.
Okay, the reunion itself
That's correct.
is every 2 years.
That's correct.
So this is the 18th reunion.
Yes.
Okay.
The first reunion started in 1984.
Mhm.
And then between 1984 and 1988, it was annually. From 1988 to, you can say now, we've been having it every 2 years.
Okay. Now, how did this reunion come about? I'm interested to know. And why is it important? Give us a little history and background. I am sure that some of the similarities,
Yes.
just like what Miss Bass said in terms of holding the Diaspora Conference.
Well, first of all, allow me to say thanks very much for inviting me to be part of this. I'll use this as a very prestigious interview for us, because this is one interview that we don't have too often. And also considering that this is just the second time under the Returning National Association that ANSAR is being held in St. Kitts. There was one time before the Returning National was formed, that was in 1988. But to answer the question, Anguilla, Nevis and St. Kitts Association reunion started in Montreal in 1983, and that was the brainstorm of Mrs. Faustina Bourgeonet, who is the daughter of the former Minister France, Mr. France, J.N. France, his daughter. And it was a group of nationals in Montreal, both from Anguilla, Nevis and St. Kitts, and that diaspora, that diasporic area, when they came together. And they thought it was useful at that time, especially with the conflicts and the racial problems that they've been having, and not only that, to reach out to folks in the Caribbean.
Sure.
And to exchange a lot of information and education of what's really happening in North America, and reaching out to what's happening in the Caribbean. So that came about then, and then it became wider. And from that, it spread to the United States, to Europe, and obviously to St. Kitts and even the U.S. Virgin Islands. Primarily the reason for having ANSAR is really, it started as a socializing event. And then they realized of the economic impact and the impact from a nation building standpoint that was so vital. We had representatives from governments coming up, and they started to brief them and give them information. We had questions asked. So you had an exchange. And like my colleague said, communication. I think that was one of the key things, and that's still one of the key things.
So the socializing aspect is certainly important.
Yes.
Because it is
Yes.
through socialization that connections are
That's right.
formed
And
and kept.
A lot of business deals are done that way.
Mhm.
So I think and with that component is also an area of a family connection, which even brings it closer, because the family is the single most component factor of all of us.
Basic unit.
Yeah, for all of us. So these things is where ANSAR started, but ANSAR has evolved over years and still evolving. You know, we're really looking now at economic impact. The area of reaching out to the younger folks, let them know what we have been through in England, in Canada, United States, and beyond, and bringing back some of our expertise and experiences towards the country and towards the local individuals also.
Okay, what is the theme this year and the date for the reunion itself?
Well, ANSAR will be from the 22nd of June to the 24th of June as the official days, and we don't have an after ANSAR event on the Monday. And the theme that we have in this year, I think, is very fitting and timely. It's renewing and strengthening our relations, celebrating our activities, our achievements, and uniting our people. And this transcends a lot, because it really says a lot for who we are, where we want to go, and how we want to come together. And we really wanted to stress that, because, you know, in today's world, you know, you're better, stronger together. So that is why we try to emphasize that and try and let everybody know, look, it doesn't matter where you're from, we are one people.
Yes.
I heard you make mention of the Jews want to go back to their home, but you never hear anybody making mention of the Africans, the Caribbean want to go back to Africa.
Well,
And the diaspora is similar, it's a different situation, of course.
you know, there was
You know,
that Back to Africa movement.
Yes.
And there were people who were pushing for that. People like Marcus Garvey and so on, Garveyism, and all of that. And then the movement, of course, was one where the push was more for a physical going back. But later on, of course, that just dissipated, the physical going back to more a sort of a back to one's roots in terms of a sort more of a connection. And there are reasons why they did not want to go to Africa after a while. You know what some of those reasons are. It wasn't as bountiful.
Well, that too, but a lot has to do with the culture and the teaching and the training and the exploitation that we received. But I don't think we really want to go down to that.
We don't want to go down to that road. But the point is that there's always a longing.
Yes.
There's always a longing to return
To your homeland.
to your homeland.
That's correct.
There's always that
That's right.
longing.
Yep.
And even if you don't return, that does not mean that you don't maintain the relationships and the connections, because, you know, that is where you really were socialized and formed.
If I
You
could
know?
interject here, Mr. Williams, there was a World Bank study in 2013. It studied the Caribbean diaspora, and it said that for every person currently living in the Caribbean, there's one person outside who would have migrated. And it said that if there are 10 persons outside, 9 of them, 90% of them, are interested in returning to
Yes.
their homeland in order to invest.
Hmm.
So it said that that is an untapped resource.
Yes.
But this is ANSAR.
Yeah. Mr. James, how is ANSAR, or how has ANSAR contributed to the growth and the development of St. Kitts and Nevis in the past?
Well, I like to start
Apart from the socializing.
I like to start by really emphasizing the fact that the ANSAR is an event, and the event is hosted by the St. Kitts Nevis Returning Nationals Association. So the St. Kitts Nevis Returning Nationals Association, which has existed since 1999, has been very active in community development in quite a wide area of economic development, through the schools, through the hospitals, donations to charitable organizations and so forth. But the ANSAR event is specifically is a non-profitable organization of event that gives back to the community. I can recall in 2008, after the event in St. Kitts, we had contributed the funds that was profit towards Anguilla, towards Nevis, and to St. Kitts. Everybody is primarily, you said, volunteers, pro bono. We work in it in the sense of giving back. And this is something that I think is not really being echoed because we do it quietly. But perhaps it's good for people to get to know some of the good things that we have done, some of the achievements that has happened over the years. You know, I mean, if I can just take a moment just to highlight a few here that come into the think is the returning national. The National Children's Home on several occasions is one area that we have given back to. Constructed a ramp for wheelchair access to the Carden Home. Donated hampers and other assistance to the senior citizens. Present an annual award to the best male student of CFBC. Sponsored a student at CFBC for a whole year for lunch at CFBC. Donated 100 sheets and pillows cases to the Jane France and Alexander Hospital in St. Kitts and Nevis. Donated clocks, cooling fans, mats, other items to the Molyneux Hospital. Provided lunch for a year to female inmates at Her Majesty Prison. Donated tools to the male inmates to Her Majesty Prison. Donated financial assistance to individuals in need, including a donation of $500 to the Mitchum Fund, which is one of our candidates. And the list goes on and on. You know, so these are just a little bit of what we've done. But on the bigger picture, I believe this is an area where we want to reach out holistically to everybody for them to understand that, look, the returning nationals or members who are returning is not Santa Claus coming home in June with a bag of money over his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
We are here to work with the communities. We're here to establish collaborative issues and collaboration in every aspect. And at the same time, recognize us as one of us. And this is the area that I think sometimes become challenging to some of our members as being reported from time to time. We like exclusive club, which is not being the case. So I really want to change that by really extending an invitation specifically to nationals for the ANSAR 2018 event, starting with the opening ceremony in Nevis. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is under the patronage of His Excellency the Governor General, which we want to say thank you to him this time for really giving us this opportunity. We're grateful for that. And also, I'd like to also extend many thanks to the Nevis Island Administration, in particular Premier Vance Amory and the current
Premier Matt Franklin.
Yeah, the former Premier, former Premier Vance, because he started with him, and the current Premier, Moso Mark Brantley.
Yes.
I had it backwards.
Now, you mentioned that the opening ceremony will take place in Nevis.
That's correct.
What are some of the events? What are some of the other events that the returning nationals will host?
Well, we'll start from Nevis, because after the opening ceremony in Nevis, we'll have a lunch. And right after the lunch, we're having a short island tour, 2.5 hours island tour of Nevis, showcasing some of the historical places in Nevis, and let some of the folks who've been away, who have never been to Nevis, you'll be surprised a lot, but even some persons here in St. Kitts have never been to Nevis, you know. So we really want them to see that, look, Nevis is developing as good and just as us, you know. We'll be staying at the Prince William Street, where there will be a black gathering. We'll have a taste of Nevis, fruits and, you know, bakery stuff and spirits and so forth. And then we're back on the ferry, we run to St. Kitts for the gala in the evening. The grand gala in the evening will be at the Marriott, and that will be having keynote speaker on both occasions, both in Nevis and in St. Kitts. Dr. Lionel Rollins, everybody knows he will be a keynote speaker in St. Kitts at the gala. And a young lady who is a young lawyer of Kittitian parentage will be keynote speaker in Nevis, Shez Christopher. Very prominent lawyer in the UK right now. Then we move from the Marriott, if I may.
Sure.
After the gala on the Saturday night, we have an interdenominational service, still at the Marriott. That is really interdenominational, which we're trying to have really Christian Council involved, and we'll have quite a few acts from a religious standpoint in that event.
Mm-hmm.
That will conclude the Marriott activities at that particular time. But of course, the marketplace will be always open. We'll be showcasing a lot of our goods, a lot of wares, souvenirs, arts, crafts, you name it. That will be always open. You can say almost 24 hours a day. You can say, depends on the patrons' participation. Mm-hmm. We're moving across to the Royal St. Kitts Hotel, and they will be having a big Sunday afternoon lunch. That lunch will be having some cultural activities, and our keynote speaker will be Dr. Razette Wilson Hunt. I think she's a radio personality, that comes on as a
Just the way you said that, you're making me salivate. This big Sunday lunch.
That's right. It's supposed to be sumptuous. I was told. I was told. So everybody look forward to that. So Dr. Hunt will, you can say, bring out the curtains of that segment after lunch. And then we roll over to the splash section of the Water St. Kitts. We will have, we call it a cultural explosion and fashion fusion. Why? Because we believe that there is none like that currently. Sort of program we're bringing together. It's a mixture of age group, a mixture of content. So we're looking for an example. We bring back the old Tunka Abdurrahman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we bring in Dijo. We bring in Ayatollah. We bring in Mr. Lonely. A lot of us forgot about him. We bring in some young dancers and pan players and drummers and the whole works. That's going to be a phenomenal. We should invite all to participate in that event.
Okay. Now, how many people are you expecting? How many returning nationals are you expecting to be a part of this reunion?
Well, I will start from what happened in 2008 to come forward, because this is going to be bigger and better. And in 2008, we had to close off the Marriott for the gala. We had approximately 590 plus folks coming in for 2008 ANSAR. But we learned from some of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody looked forward to St. Kitts because it is said, and so I've been told, that we are one of the better answers. I mean, some of my colleagues may not like to hear that, but that's what I've been told. You know, in any event, 2018 will be different. And the difference is because we're having the opening ceremony in Nevis. I believe that brings some sort of a difference to the overall aspect, the unity, the love, the togetherness, which I think that we need to go forward as a people. And because of that, the attendance is zoomed up. We have NEVCAN, we have the Anguilla Association, we have the Florida Association, New York Association. All of these guys are coming down. Some of my old schoolmates that left since high school days are coming in. You know, but I really want to have and see a lot of our local folks attending this event. And this, the number we're looking at coming in, the last count I've heard, at least from the Marriott aspect, it was over 400 already registered in there.
Okay.
And outside of the Marriott, in the other hotels, you could estimate another 100, 150.
So it's a real boost as well
we're looking at a big boost, yeah.
for the economy.
For the economy, that's for sure.
You could understand why we are having our Diaspora Conference around that time.
Yes.
We sandwiched it between the ANSAR meeting and the music festival, because we realized that this will be an opportunity for many persons who will be coming home to get together. And so we have the conference between those two events.
Right.
And I must say that Mr. James is also on our committee as a contributing member. In the
You have
local
been very
organization.
opportunistic.
Yes. We have to strategize if we're going to
Yes.
advance the interest of our nation.
And like a returning
Right.
national, we're here to help and to give and to work and collaborate.
Certainly.
You know.
Yeah.
I would just like to really, again, say how much I appreciate this opportunity and working with the diaspora on this matter. There have been some challenging moments. When you don't have challenging moments, you can't go.
Now,
That's the way I look at
who
it.
are some of the members on the local organizing committee for
Okay.
ANSAR in St. Kitts
Well,
this year?
That's a good question you ask. We never get to call the names too often because a lot of them in the background, and you always see my face. This time you see someone else's face, you know. Mr. Michael Hendrickson is the deputy chair of the ANSAR event. We also have Mr. Charles Benjamin, who is the president of the Returning Nationals. And by the way, I'm the vice president of the Returning Nationals also. We have Althea Azel, who's the public relation, a PR person right now. We also have two step workers with us who've been very useful, and I want to thank the government, especially through the Ministry of Finance and also Minister Grant. I really want to say thanks to Minister Grant. Because of him, we'll be able to utilize the space we have and all other avenues and stuff like that. And if I may, I would really like to single out a couple of sponsors. I don't know if this is permitted on your show.
You go ahead.
But in truth and in fact, TDC through Mr. Menon has been very, very helpful to us, and SL Hosford been very, very useful to us, among a number of other, sponsors. The whole event of ANSAR, I really believe that is bringing something different, something that I think is unique in the sense, because of the fact that the folks that's coming in is really looking to see what's happening. They need help, they need directive, they need the truth, they need to say, hey, wait a minute, this is saying this 20 years ago? This is, you get this all the time, And because we have the showcasing of Nevis, and then a boat ride on the Monday evening, and by the way, we are also in collaborating with other activities after ANSAR, namely Diaspora, namely the museum, historical museum, what is it again? Historical museum, forgive me for not remembering the official name, but they're having a fundraiser for the overall historical museum at the Treasury.
Oh, yes, St. Christopher Heritage. St. Christopher Heritage Trust, yeah.
St. Christopher Heritage, thanks. I believe Miss Percival would forgive me for that. Yes, and also there's the rebirth for women's shelter. That's another area that we thought is useful for us to really contribute and help, the women that is in real need and need that protection and that sort of information. So these are areas where we are in collaboration with. Respect to ANSAR.
Certainly. Now you were going to talk about the members of the committee.
Yes.
The planning committee.
The members of the local organizing committee hail from different ministries, because we realize that it must be a multi-sectoral approach, multi-stakeholder approach, and we have the Ministry of Tourism, represented often by the Permanent Secretary herself, and we have the Permanent Secretary in Finance, Ms. Sherilyn Pemberton. We also have Mr. James here, Chair of ANSAR, SKNIS, represented usually by Kimberly Grant. We have Information Technology, IT, and I must say thank you to Ms. Ophelia Blanchard, Erica Paris, and Desika Hendrickson, who have been very instrumental in helping us get some of the IT matters cleared up.
Yes.
We also have Ms. Doretta Freites from Skipper, and from Nevis we have the Nevis Tourism Association, represented by Mr. Greg Phillip. And of course, members of my staff at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I must say thank you to them as well for their commitment and dedication to this effort. But as Mr. James was speaking about the donations and contributions of persons, we realize that there are a lot of people who give back, but it is haphazard, it is ad hoc, it is not institutionalized.
So there's no way of measuring it.
So this is why we are hoping that one of the outcomes of the Diaspora Conference will have a diaspora policy. We already have a draft policy. We'll be sharing it at the conference, hoping to get some input and feedback from participants so that the government can strategize as to what it has to do now and what it can do in order to harness the resources of our diaspora members, but also to help members who are living overseas.
I think that was a good point in terms of the diaspora policy. I don't know if there's any sort of governmental diaspora-focused entities, that can play a dual role. Yes. For example, facilitating diaspora contributions and to the homeland and serving the diaspora. We do. Yeah. We don't have any governmental diaspora-focused entities in our countries of origin.
So that is what we're trying to do. The policy has in it a recommendation that a unit be established. As you know, there is the Department for Constituency Empowerment and Diaspora Affairs. And we are hoping that something could be institutionalized, even if it is that same entity. It could be institutionalized, and it could have, a mandate as to how it is going to engage the diaspora and maintain that engagement. diaspora engagement is a process. And so the first diaspora conference is a beginning that will, and the efforts and activities related to that, we hope will continue for some time.
Right.
It is not that after the diaspora, or the diaspora is the end all and it all. It is the start to something greater.
Mm-hmm.
And we will also be having a magazine. In that magazine, we will showcase some of the St. Kitts and Nevis associations overseas, what they're doing. We've had articles from persons who are in the diaspora,
Sure.
members of our missions overseas, and we also have sponsors who will be featured in the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
We have the speakers and their bios, etc.
Right. Now, of course, while we speak about the diaspora and their contribution to national economies and national development, we have to understand too that the diaspora or diasporic communities have met a lot of sometimes hostility. They have to face racism, integration into these bigger societies, metropolitan societies. Of course, most of, for example, in the Caribbean, we are coming from colonial societies. And the colonial societies, of course, were always looked at as being less than the metropolitan countries. And people migrating to the metropolitan countries have to face this sort of reality that, look, you are not seen as. You know, and we had a case recently, of course, in terms of the what you call the Windrush generation in the United Kingdom, people who went to the UK in the 40s and 50s and so on, up to 1971 or 73, I think, who somehow were having problems in terms of documentation when it came to the immigration system. So what is really government's help for those persons who face such challenges in the diaspora?
As indicated earlier, the relationship between the diaspora and their home countries can be mutually beneficial. They, when they go overseas, can serve as our ambassadors to a certain degree because they take our culture, they take our whatever image they portray or display will give an indication of perhaps what your country is like. So we see them as our ambassadors to a certain extent. They also can promote the country and tourism. They can, when they come home, they can add to the tourism product. I understand that for Guyana and Suriname, about 70% of their tourists who return are actually persons from those countries or their descendants. And so when they face problems overseas, this is an opportunity for their home government to assist where necessary. And our embassies and consulates or missions overseas can play a significant role, as we saw what happened in the UK recently with our High Commissioner, Dr. Kevin Isaac. They can bring attention, as he did, to the challenges that they are facing. They brought it first to the media, and then at the political level, they can also negotiate. So the government can play a significant role in assisting members of the diaspora through, whether directly, because our Prime Minister, while he was attending the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, also had the opportunity to meet with high-level officials, his counterpart, UK counterpart, Prime Minister May, and the Foreign Minister was also able to meet with his counterpart, Lord Ahmad. So the diaspora overseas, it is important that they maintain the link, and that is why we have our missions getting together a database, and we encourage them to give their information so that when they are experiencing any difficulties, it is easy for our missions to contact them or to know their details, to share where necessary. In the case of the Windrush issue, We know that many of them lost their jobs. Many persons from the Caribbean lost their jobs. Some of them were locked out of access to their bank accounts and to the health system. And with the help of our High Commissioner and that of the High Commissioner of Barbados, I must mention, they were able to bring this to the fore and cause the government to act. And I must say, the government of the UK did respond, and responded quickly and positively. And now our High Commissioner in London is maintaining contact with trying to ascertain any of our citizens who might have been affected adversely, and trying to access the benefits that are now being provided by the government.
Right. So the diasporic communities in these metropolitan countries in some way can impact upon policy at the government level.
Of course.
But they
Whether
certainly
in
have
their
to push.
country-
But they have to push harder.
Yeah, whether in their country of destination or the country of origin.
Yes.
So it works both ways.
Right. Now, I am soon going to go to the phone lines, but one of the things coming out of what you know of all of this is that, of course, the grass is not always greener on the other side, because most times when people leave, of course, we mentioned there are push factors to push people out, and there are pull factors. And of course, people leave because they think that they are going to a better opportunity. It doesn't always work out that way. The grass is not always greener on the other side. So sometimes when these people come home, they wear a few gold chain and so on, and they want to give an impression that things are so sweet, and that's not normally sometimes the case.
That is true too. But others, there are some who make it.
Some
who
do.
well.
Some do well.
And
It's a harsh reality
Yes.
out there, and we all know that. And the question I really want to ask is, what is our governments doing to prevent this exodus of people going to the metropolitan countries? What are they doing in terms of creating jobs for our people, especially our qualified people and so on, who do not want to return because they return home and there were really no spaces for them to fill? So I think that that question also has to be on the foreminds
yes.
of our governments.
Yeah, and good thing.
I wanted to jump in here, Mr. Williams, on that matter, because I've been living in Canada for over 30 years and traveled across United States, Canada, and beyond. And even more recently, members of the St. Kitts and Nevis Fraternity National Association, there have been the sporadic negatives that came to mind. That many times when they come back home to assemble, it's a challenge, because the society at large always give an impression as if who you think you be. And you get a problem when you go to even purchase a house, even to get a mechanic to come to fix your car, even to repair your property. And sometimes you don't have that support system.
Yes,
You know
because
what I mean?
it's like when you're going to prison.
Yes,
Because you have to reintegrate into the society from which you came.
that's right.
And sometimes you have grown accustomed to a faster pace of life, a more organized way of life.
That's right.
Some of the laws that we have here and the culture that we have here, that was, put on us by these metropolitan countries who have long abolished those very same things and so on. You have to come back and face those.
That's right.
Yes. And I think
And-
it is a matter of
Go ahead.
education, public education. We have to begin to understand and to educate our people that the diaspora plays a significant role. We have to highlight the remittances that they send home to their families when they're abroad. We have to highlight the fact that some of them contribute to, they invest in the country, tourism, human capital. All of these positives must be highlighted so that the stigma, the negative stigma that is associated with returning nationals or persons living abroad, that this could be reduced or eliminated.
That is so true, but the remittances, of course, they contribute much more than that. But sometimes the remittances, permit me for saying this, but we develop this sort of a barrel syndrome and box syndrome, and it creates a sort of a laziness sometimes on the part of our people. That, you know, you sit down and you're waiting on a barrel and you're waiting on a box. And you see, of course, the money, Western Union and MoneyGram and so all of these things cropping up and so on. And while they contribute in some way, you know, sometimes they create a sort of a lackadaisical attitude that I can sit down and wait on money to come from abroad without getting up off of my backside and doing something. You see?
Yeah, but it is not only the remittances. I mean, I think it is important to emphasize the transfer of knowledge, the knowledge transfer, and the best practices that they have developed in their countries of adoption or destination, which they can bring back.
I agree.
For the benefit of the country.
I certainly agree.
At the same time, though, that's sometimes the challenges, because like you bring back the best practices and they say, hey, you say in England, you see not Canada, you think it be, we're doing it this way all the time, you know. So I mean, I'm not here to really go.
You have that too, and then sometimes people come back, and of course, you know, because you know they've been away so long and they have an accent and so on. They say, "Who you think you be?" And Louise Bennett has a very nice poem on that.
That's correct.
I think his Little Boy or something.
Yeah. But another major factor that I think we have kind of overlooked is the remittances of property development. I think that being phenomenal here. A lot of persons returning home has significant property investment here that sometimes is kind of overlooked. You know, there's a very vibrant statistic that really showed that sort of development is happening. From
the real estate, and
real estate
property
aspect of it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So the investment.
That's right. The investment aspect is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. You know. And it's spread even wider because a lot of times they even bring friends with them.
Yes.
They bring other colleagues with them.
Right.
People who work with them.
Certainly.
You know. And I want to just go back a little here to talk about the brain drain. The brain drain started way back from the sugar industry. You probably might be aware. I might be little bit younger than you. But, that said, is the fact that we had phenomenal training from a trade, from a professional, from a skill aspect. That, in my opinion, has somewhat not been continued over time. Like anything else, the economic situation changed, but a lot of those persons who is in Canada, who is in England, got their technical training here. That is what gave them the opportunities now to be managers. Some of them are retired. And it was because of the sugar factory, for an example, that really caused these folks to be where they are today. That is a significant point that sometimes it just passes over our heads, you know. And we really want to raise that and put a plug in for skill training. Yes. I believe that's a key area that we really need to re-emphasize in the school curriculum.
Okay, Mr. Bass, and then we'll go to the phone lines.
One of the questions you raised is what is the government doing to create jobs, etc. I think it is time that our society try to look away from only what the government can do.
Entrepreneurship.
To entrepreneurship. And that is why the conference, the Diaspora Conference, is going to be so significant and symbolic, because a lot of persons who are coming, and I must say, by the way, that we were overwhelmed by the number of responses of persons who are willing to come to just do presentations at their own expense.
Yes.
They're paying their own way, they're paying for the accommodation, and we had to turn one or two away because of time constraint.
Yes, right.
And so we hope that those who will be coming and participating on the forum will stress the need for young persons to start looking at how can I employ myself and others. So small and medium-sized enterprises would also be a focus within the conference, as well as entrepreneurship. Certainly.
Now let's go to the phone lines. We don't have much time, but the local number is 465-2555 and the overseas number is 1718-577-2916. We welcome your calls. There is no one on the line as yet. There is something that I want to mention, and that is, while we speak about the diaspora in terms of those persons who have left from our country and have gone to the metropolitan countries to live. We have to think of our attitudes towards the diasporic communities in our own country. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You always some important points here. The small island states cannot and will never ever able to develop certain infrastructures to the extent where they could employ them in the small island states. I play for the U.S. Virgin Islands. A lot of people, yes, they're part of the United States, but when they go to study in the U.S., they don't go back to the Virgin Islands. They stay up in the States because they get employment. The same thing happened to us on that being at US. People, but it's still about brain drain again. I don't know if it's brain drain, but when people go out, people come in to replace them. And so you keep training if you got the training facilities. But then when they go abroad, just like you were saying, they set up themselves in the diaspora and they send remittances in our farms, or in many farms. So, if people get education and they go overseas and develop themselves, because a place like the United States is where you could get your full potential better than any other country on earth. And we should be thankful for that. Because economies nowadays are interlinked. They always been, but more so nowadays. When they want certain infrastructure development, even in the United States, when they're going to do them, they don't employ all Americans. They look for the best from where they get them, whether South Africa, Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, or wherever. So that's a point you all got to look at. But anyway, I welcome the dialogue with the ANSAR people, and they need to not just come to our conference. They need to concretize what they say they're going to do. And let us really wait. Let us form some kind of organization that they could get development, because this government would answer them. They get something that they could develop. And you see, they have the capital, but you can't produce something unless you have all the factors, the 4 factors. Anyway, I'll say it for now. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'll say it for now. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much for your comments and questions. I think we realize that in order to attract persons, in order to prevent a brain drain or to reduce it, the government has to create an enabling environment, and it has to be able to attract those persons who go abroad to study.
That's correct.
And come back. And we must attract them to come back. I mean, this is not an easy task, but some persons who would have worked overseas for some time, who would have spent 10, 15 years, these are the persons who might be willing to come back after having developed themselves, developed some skills.
Yes.
They are willing to give more freely and more willingly of their services. Not so much, it's not the money that might be attractive.
Is it a sort
to
of a
them.
philanthropy?
Yes.
Diaspora
altruistic spirit,
philanthropy.
they might be, yes, and so they might be willing to work for less than they are accustomed to in the States once they have advanced themselves, because these are people who might already have a home and so on. It is difficult, I imagine, for a young person just starting out, but persons who would have spent a number of years overseas would now want to give back to their country.
I totally agree with what Mrs. Bass said, in the sense of the government cannot sustain, or maybe even compete with a youngster who graduated in engineering. I had a situation like that. Graduated in engineering, and the company A is paying you X amount of dollars, another one is paying you whatever. I mean, you're not going to say, hey, leave that side of our offer and come back unless you really is patriotic or you have some
Yes.
other means to come back home, right? So this is something that I think is an education process. At the same time too, one has to always, I believe, especially when it is a scholarship basis, I believe the firm rules has to be put in place in situations like this, where you find, people get education and go abroad and you don't see them again. And that to me has been a grassroots problem for years. But in the systemic of things, I really believe it's a situation here where, because this brain drain happening all over the world in the nursing. The Americans is bringing all the nurses from the Philippines down there. You get in England. I mean, in Canada, we bring a lot of engineers from England to Canada. We're shortage. Technical and professional services all over the world. I mean, I've been through that. I can speak all day on that. The issue here, I think, though, is for the returnees to feel comfortable, for them to understand we need you, and not for them to come back in here and feel as though, hey, we're begging for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And these are some of the things that come across at times, which, I'd really like to be in any way, shape or form to help, to contribute in that area, in the sense for them to understand, listen, man, look, you're home. Home is home. It's something, just like you move from here to any part of the world, you have to readjust. It's another adjustment. But sometimes it's a challenge to adjust. When you come home, you realize, why I can't, I can't handle this, So everything is education, and at the same time, you gotta love what you want to do. It's
And
another
I
aspect
think
of it.
the diaspora policy that we are going to, that has been developed and will be launched during the conference will be very, very important, because it lays out the strategies, and it sort of gives, it sort of institutionalizes the relationship and the engagement, so that if the government is deficient in terms of skills in one area that is a priority for the government, it can recruit from abroad persons skilled in those areas. So
Yes.
persons who are coming home, for example, maybe we need nurses, and somebody has worked overseas for years in the health sector, and they have the capabilities and the skills and whatever, then they can go directly, to the health ministry, because
Certainly.
there is a vacancy, or there is a deficiency, or there is a lack. And so that is why the policy outlines engagement, dialogue, communication, to know where may I best fit, instead of just getting up, packing up and coming home to look for a job. When you have not done the research, you don't know if there are any vacancies, if you can work there. So we hope that the policy will sort of provide a map, a roadmap as to how we can improve.
Right. And we are not only talking about the public sector,
Yes.
of course, but the private sector.
Of course.
Because many persons, I think, can fit. Some don't want to be in the public sector.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that's
some want to be in the private sector. Some feel as though, the in the public sector, politics runs too deeply. So, but we were before, because we soon wrap up. But I wanted for us to look at it this way. While we have a diaspora community in these metropolitan countries, whether it is Toronto or London or New York,
Canada.
We should learn from this. We are in other countries, nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis, and nationals of other countries are in St. Kitts and Nevis.
That's correct.
We have a diaspora community here, and we are benefiting from the diaspora community that we have here, because they are contributing to our national development. We have Hispanics, we have Jamaicans, we have others. Sometimes our attitudes towards them are not always the best, but we have to understand that that is the way the world works. And the gentleman who called before, he said societies are linked and economies are linked. And that is so true, because there are people here who are working and they are sending money back to their countries as well, Jamaicans and Hispanics to the Dominican Republic, and so on. At the very same time, they are contributing to our economy, whether they're providing a service in terms of barbering or hairdressing, or nail art, or whatever the construction and so on, they are contributing here as well. So maybe from that perspective, introspective, that we can say, well, look, we have to treat those who are here, our diaspora community, and maximize their use in terms of national development.
And that's one of the reasons why the ANSAR event is so important. Because ANSAR is for national and friends. And we, for an example, in our program, we have Jam Kitnev participate in our event, for an example. We reach out to other groups. It's not just Anguilla, Nevis, and St. Kitts nationals.
Right.
We want to reach out to everybody in the sense and make them feel at home. Because we need them and they need us.
and that is the whole point of
this
it.
I mean, for an example, my dad from Dominica, my grandmother from Anguilla. And that happens all over.
But sometimes we develop this sort of an attitude that is very nationalistic, that we and xenophobic.
Yeah.
We don't want, others. But yet, when we go abroad, we don't want to be treated that way.
I'd like to quickly add too that these are some of the, the articles that will be in our magazine. The ANSAR 2018 magazine is a comprehensive magazine that we're bringing forward as usual. We really have what do you call it? Different segments of it that will be bringing out these sort of avenues and opportunities where we dialogue, and we have different through the whole package of the magazine. We'll be having that coming in the magazine. So we really want to emphasize that.
Right. We have to wrap up because the Prime Minister has his press conference at 3 o'clock. So I would ask you to give your final say.
I would like to thank the Cabinet for approving the formalization of this committee to plan for its first St. Kitts and Nevis Diaspora Conference. I would wish to thank also the Honorable Matt Brantley, who has supported us all through. He will actually be hosting an activity in Nevis as well.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead. We'll take one call. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and to your panel.
Good afternoon.
Just quickly, we got to understand, now I'm coming from a historical perspective. All of us came here on the same ships. Some were dropped off on Spanish colonial islands, some were dropped off on French colonial islands, and some were dropped off on British colonial islands. Our ancestors came from the same place. So whether we speak Spanish or we have a Jamaican accent, if all of us have to do a DNA test, we all have the same ancestors. Yes, we have a problem with illegal immigration, but we cannot paint everybody with the same brush, and that's just my little input.
Go ahead.
Well,
that was just a comment.
I really want to extend my profound appreciation and thanks to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis in general, specifically the Prime Minister and Minister Brantley, Minister Lindsey Grant. He has been, I can't ask for more behind us. I also want to thank my colleague here, P.S. Bass. I think we've worked very well together. I've learned a lot, and I believe she has learned a lot from us, and I'm looking forward for continuing and working with her. I really want to reach out to Nevis in particular, because I think Nevis had really given us something that really I'm moved by. I'm going over to Nevis. I'll be on the map tonight, the show in Nevis.
Okay.
I'll be on NTV tomorrow in Nevis. So we're not just stopping. We want to let everybody know that we're here, and we want everybody to be on board.
Sure.
We have prizes and surprises in ANSAR 28. Thank you.
Ms. Bass, anything else?
Yes, thank you for having us. I want to again thank the local organizing committee for all of their hard work and dedication, and thanks to all our sponsors. They will be recognized and acknowledged in our magazine and on the program as well.
Certainly. And I think we had a jingle.
Yes, I'm not sure if
we had a jingle from ANSAR. It didn't come up.
You didn't find it.
Okay, fine. Well, I want to thank you, Miss Bass and Mr. James.
Thank you kindly.
Certainly, you have provided a lot of information in terms of the ANSAR reunion,
Thank you.
the reunion, and the conference that both are coming up in June. One is the Diaspora Conference is June 26 to 28, and the ANSAR is the June 22nd to the 24th. You know, and the importance of our diaspora community to national development. I think that was well treated on today's program, and we see the significance of the diaspora community. We have not cut them off. We maintain the communication, and so the trust is built, and so on. So thank you very
Thanks a lot.
much.
Thank you very much.
This has been another edition of Working for You. I am your host, Les Roy Williams. Next week, we will have another Working for You. We thank all of our listeners and all of our callers. We appreciate you from week to week. Until then, have a good time.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and by extension, the Government of St. Kitts and Nevis, invites you to its first Diaspora Conference to be held at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort from the 26th to the 28th of June 2018. This historic event has as its theme, Building Partnerships Towards Sustainable Development. It will attract approximately 200 diaspora participants from academia, government, and the private sector, who are widely dispersed across the globe, including Canada, the United Kingdom, the USA, and elsewhere. The theme captures the event's intent to provide information, sharing, and networking opportunities aimed at building capacity for an uncertain future. According to a 2013 World Bank study, there is nearly one person living abroad in the diaspora to every person still resident within the Caribbean, making the diaspora an untapped potential resource for economic development. We therefore invite you to attend this historic event at the Marriott Resort, 26th to 28th June 2018. See you there.
Working for You. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Les Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.